Hi everyone. I still want to say Happy New Year, even though I've already uploaded a video since the New Year, but Happy New Year anyway, and I hope you're having a good start to this week. I have a stack of 20 books next to me because we need to talk about the books that I read in December before I can get on and talk about my favourite books of the year, which is a video that will be coming out later this week. So let's go through all of these books I read in December. I will list everything that I mentioned in the description box down below. We're going to move through these fairly swiftly. I say fairly because the videos always end up being longer than I think they're going to be when I'm filming, because I did film 2 week-long reading vlogs in December where I discussed many of these books, but there are some that I still haven't talked about. So let's get through all of them, and then at the end of that, I want to talk about some of my not goals for 2022, but things I have planned loosely for the coming year, and I also need to know some things from you for forthcoming videos too. All right, so let's dive into the books first. At the beginning of December, I decided to film a reading vlog, which I'll link up here and down below, where I read some of the shortest books on my TBR. In this pile of books that I read in December, we do have a few DNFs, and there was there a DNF? Actually, there were no DNFs when it came to the short books of the year, because they were so short, but there were definitely some that I preferred to others. There were 2 that I loved, and those were Niall Giacomelli's The Therapist, which is a modern day ghost story. It is a apocalyptic book about a pandemic where people are turning invisible, but it also has all these historical gothic elements, and I thought that was balanced really well. I think the imagery is really sound. Everything is woven together so neatly. I was very impressed by it. And the other one was Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls, which was a reissue by Faber. So this was published in 2021, but it was originally published in the early 1980s. This one has a foreword by Erenison Okojie. It's about a housewife, Dorothy, who falls in love with a frogman called Larry, a creature from the sea who is possibly part man. No one really knows. He's escaped from the local institute where scientists have been experimenting on him. If I had to do book maths on it, I would say it's like a cross between The Shape of Water and WandaVision. And I just thought it was brilliant. Lots of really unsettling things bubbling under the surface. I told a lie, there was one DNF. It was by Rodrigo de Souza Leal, which is All Dogs Are Blue, translated from the Portuguese by Zoe Perry and Stefan Tobler. This one just wasn't for me, but I did talk about it in the vlog. Then I read Lark by Anthony McGowan, and this is a book about 2 brothers and a perilous situation that they find themselves in when they get lost one day. I was really invested in this stressful situation, and it really, really got to me. This is a book that's published by Barrington Stoke Teen, which is a publisher that specialise in bringing out books specifically for people who have dyslexia. So the text that they use is easier to read. And this is a book for teenagers, which has the appropriate language for teenagers, but is with dyslexic people in mind, which means that the payoff is so much more satisfying if you're reading a book like this and are dyslexic. So I really love everything that Barrington Stoke are about. I wasn't keen on the representation of disability in this book, which I spoke about in that vlog, but I did enjoy the rest of it. One Love Chigusa by Soji Samanda, which is translated from the Japanese by David Warren, was a book I didn't love. It's science fiction. Again, didn't like its representation of disability. I thought that it was quite stereotypical and just not very interesting. Couldn't get emotionally invested. This one I was not a fan of. I read The Annual Migration of Clouds by Premi Mohammed, which is a really interesting dystopian post-apocalyptic book about a group of people who live in a very closed off community, and they're not sure what exists outside of their boundaries. And one day the main character gets a letter saying she's been accepted into a university far away, but she's not sure if this university actually exists or if it's a trick. This whole book is world building, which I found a little bit frustrating. What I thought the book was going to be based on the opening few pages and chapters isn't what it actually turned out to be. It's not an epic journey. It's not about her going to the university. It is just about the place that she lives now. But I was impressed with the amount of detail and thought that had gone into creating this post-apocalyptic world. And then I also read The Archive of Alternate Endings by Lindsay Drager, which is a book that I greatly admired. It's very experimental. Would recommend it for fans of Fitzcarraldo editions or Laffigue Press in the States. It's told in vignettes and it's reimagining Hansel and Gretel as a fairy tale over the centuries if it originated being about a young boy who'd been kicked out of his house because his parents were homophobic, and it also tracks the story in line with Halley's Comet. I mean, I know that that sounds ridiculous, but it somehow works. I didn't think that everything came together very well ultimately, but I loved the thought processes. I loved how it made me think, and I would be very interested to see what else she writes. Then after that, where should we move on to? Spoiler, one of my favorite books of the year was my next read, which is Strange Beasts of China by Yan Ji, which is translated from the Chinese by Jeremy Tiang. I'll speak about this more in my favorite books of the year video. I don't want to repeat myself too much given that they're going up in the same week, but this is a wonderful book, which is like a series of interconnected short stories, but you do have to have read the previous chapters for the story that you're currently reading to make sense. It's about a cryptozoologist in a fabricated city in China tracking these mythological creatures and trying to work out whether or not they exist. And some of them have existed historically and live in the belly of the city, and some of them have been created by scientists. It reminded me a lot of Hiromi Kawakami, and I just thought it was great. So I'll speak about that more in my other video. And from one of my favorite books of the year to another DNF, this is Someday at Christmas by Lizzie Byron. I bought this last December, as in December 2020. I was just craving some kind of Christmas wholesomeness. I just really was. I think I had watched, I can't even remember the name of the film now, but it had Kristen Stewart in, and I was very excited about it because it was going to be a queer Christmas film, but then it didn't fill me with all of the feelings that I'd hoped it was going to fill me with, because it just wasn't a very happy Christmas film. So I really wanted to read a happy Christmas book, and one of my favorite Christmas film when I was younger was The Greatest Store in the World, which is about a family that live in a department store secretly because the caravan that they live in burnt down, and I was just fascinated by that. It was a great film, you know, with Peter Capaldi and S Club 7. What more could you want in your life? And this is a book that is also set in a department store, and I thought, you know, maybe it'll give me the same feelings I had when I was young. But unfortunately it didn't, and it's probably not surprising. It is a romance book. I don't tend to get on well with romance books, and it was just a little bit cheesy, which is exactly what it's supposed to be, but I just couldn't feel those feelings. So I think this one sadly is not for me. And as much as I would like to get the Christmas cheer, I don't think I'm going to get it in exactly that format. A book that I am carrying on into this year is an audiobook. I put this in the pile to remind myself. This is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, but the book in question is actually Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, because the next themed reading vlog that I did in December was to read books that reminded me of other books, or books that that was the theme. That was exactly it. There is no need for an or. So I had read in November Fingersmith by Sarah Waters and absolutely loved it. And then I watched a video over on the Man Booker channel where she was talking about how basically she had lifted a large chunk of plot from The Woman in White. So I thought, oh, I'd like to read that then. So I've been listening to it. It's narrated by Ian Holm, and his reading of the book in particular is the thing that I'm enjoying, as opposed to maybe the text of the book itself, which is dragging a little bit. It's still very atmospheric, and there are things that I do like about it, but I'll speak about it more once I finish reading it. And then also in that vlog, I picked up Greensmith by Alia Whiteley. This was one that I thought would remind me of Preemie Mohammed, which is a book I read earlier in the month, but also of Sue Rainsford and her book Follow Me to Ground. In actual fact, it reminded me more of Flash Forward, which was a book that I read years ago, which was also turned into a TV series with Joseph Fiennes, and then it was cancelled, which was super, super frustrating. So I don't feel like I can really recommend the series, given that it ended on a cliffhanger. But this is a book that takes a lot of inspiration from Doctor Who and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's about a horticulturist called Penelope who has been collecting the seeds of plants from all over the world and storing them, and then suddenly a virus sweeps across the earth and turns all plants into goop, and a man turns up at her door and says, Penelope, this disease is sweeping the whole universe, we have to save all the plants, you can help me. And then he takes her on a journey. It's a lot stranger than that sounds, even though it sounds strange, because it's quite experimental as well. But I did have fun reading it. Not one of my favorites, but I did have a fun time. I didn't read this, but this is in the pile because I talked about it in the vlog. I was thinking of picking up The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell, which has a plot, at least on the blurb, that sounds very similar to The Book of Strange New Things by Michelle Faber. But then I received many messages from you saying that hand disfigurement plays a huge part in the book and not necessarily in a great way, and maybe that's something that I would like to look into. So I've put that to one side for now while I do that. Then I read Mr. Bridge and Mrs. Bridge by Evan S. Connell because I was wondering if Mrs. March by Virginia Vito was inspired by these books, which came out in the 1950s and 1960s. And Mrs. March, again, spoiler, is one of my favourite books of 2021. So I read both of these books, didn't quite love either of them, could see that these in turn had also been inspired by Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which is a book that I really enjoy. I had complicated feelings about both of these titles, which I talk about in detail in that reading vlog, which will be linked in the description box. Overall, not particularly ones that I would recommend, but glad to have read Mrs. Bridge in particular. And I found it really interesting that they were two novels talking about a marriage from the wife and husband point of view, and they do have some crossovers, but definitely are independent novels in the same way that they're both independent characters. So I kind of like that concept more than the text of the books themselves. The next book I read in that vlog was sadly another DNF. This is English Monsters by James Scudamore, and it's about a boy who's sent to a boarding school and then it reflects on his life there later. It is about sexual abuse, and I had picked this one up because I thought it might be similar in a dark academia way to The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And I think that is true, but the writing style reminded me a lot of Ian McEwan, which is not a writing style that I gravitate towards so much these days. It just doesn't really interest me that much, but I know that lots of other people would enjoy it. So if you are a fan of Ian McEwan and you are a fan of The Secret History, then maybe this is one that you might like to check out and see if it's for you. The final book I picked up in that vlog, though not the final book that I read in 2021, was There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job by Kikiko Samura, which was translated from the Japanese by Polly Barton. This book I loved the beginning of. It's split into 5 sections because the narrator is going between 5 different jobs. She's trying to find not a mindless job, but a job that doesn't cause burnout, and she also wants to engage with people, but also not in a way that she feels really obligated to them. I thought that the first 2 sections in particular, which was what I happened to read in the vlog itself, were brilliant, and I loved them. It was exactly what I needed, but I think that this book could have been much shorter. It is over 400 pages, and I don't mind that if a book can sustain itself for that long, but I really felt it was stretching towards the end. I wasn't as engaged as I would have liked to have been. I would still recommend this book, and I have picked it up because it gave me Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata vibes, and I think that is fair, but it is also, it's entirely its own thing. It also reminded me a little bit of The Woman in the Purple Skirt, which I also read in 2021 and which I was also slightly disappointed by. This one is definitely better than that in my opinion. I certainly got more enjoyment out of it. It's very deadpan, it's observing the world, and it has all of these very subtle, possibly magical elements that link all the jobs that she goes between, which give us this really surreal feel to it, as well as it being mundane at the same time, which is very paradoxical, but that's what this book happens to be. But then the final 3 books that I read in 2021 happen to be some of my favorite books of the year. So let me quickly tell you what those are, and then I'll talk about them in detail in my favorites video later this week. This is All the Names Given by Raymond Antrobus. This is Ray's second collection, his second full-length collection, and I've been reading this for a while. I just happened to finish it in December. I've been reading it slowly, really enjoyed it. And a poetry collection that I enjoyed even more is Cynthia Miller's Honorifics. This, I mean, I would eat it. I would eat it. It is that good. Honestly, I have lots of things I want to say about this book. I'll save it for my favorites video, but my goodness, this is just absolutely brilliant. And if you have followed my poetry videos in the past, I haven't read as much poetry this year as I would have liked to, and I'm going to get onto that in a second, and you have enjoyed a lot of poetry collections that I've recommended before, you will really love this. And then the last book that I read in 2021 was Julia and the Shark by Kieran Millward Hargrave, which is illustrated by Tom DeFreston. This one made me sob on New Year's Eve, which wasn't really what I want to be doing on New Year's Eve, but it also is exactly what I wanted to be doing, because this book gobbled me up. Like, I want to gobble up this book, and this book just swallowed me whole. This book is all encompassing and gave me all of the feelings, and I'm going to be talking about it in my favorites book of the year as well. It is absolutely stunning in every single way. So a mixed bag for December, quite a few DNFs, but also some favorite books. I can't complain. So I've been thinking about reading plans for 2022. Last week I uploaded a video kind of reflecting on my year of reading in 2021, and I don't have any specific goals for this year, and that is for lots of different reasons. I have loads of things that I want to read, and I have lots of videos that I want to make, specifically reading vlogs, which were my favorite things that I made in 2021. I mean, I've been making them for years, but I mean, just they were the things that I enjoyed the most specifically in 2021, especially themed reading vlogs. So I want to do a series of reading vlogs where I read booktuber's favorite books, where I read books that you have recommended to me, more on that in a second, where I read specifically wintry books. I want to do independent publisher spotlights, which I used to do a few years ago. Haven't done so much now, but want to incorporate that into the reading vlogs. I'm going to do a reading vlog reading all of the Barbellion Prize long list very soon. The books have arrived. I have purchased them. The Barbellion Prize is a book prize that highlights work by disabled authors. So the shortlist is announced in January, sometime this month. I'm not going to get to read all of the long list before that's announced, but I don't care. I'm going to read all of the long list anyway, and I want to talk to you about all of those books as I read them. And then I'm referring to a list that I have here. I also want to do a series of videos of reading books that remind me of specific TV shows, because I did some... What did I do? I'm doing the opposite of whatever I've done before. I did a video last year where I talked about TV shows that reminded me of certain books. And now I'm doing books that I want to read because the blurbs remind me of certain TV shows. Yes, so I want to do that, as well as lots of different ideas for reading vlogs as well. So they're the things that I'm focused on specifically for this channel, but then books in general are my job in various different forms. So I don't have any new books coming out this year myself. If you're new, hi, I'm an author. I don't have any books that I have written on my own coming out this year. I am part of at least 3 anthologies that are being published. I have a new piece of writing coming out in a book in the summer, which is about my relationship with voice to text, which is how I do a lot of my writing now. And I had a lot of fun writing that piece, and I'll talk about that in more detail when the book has been announced, with pre-orders and all the stuff like that. And a lot of my reading informs my writing and vice versa. So I'm working on about 3 different books at the moment, and one of those is trying to finish my second full-length poetry collection. My first poetry collection, The Girl Aquarium, came out in 2019, and I really would like to finish my second collection this year. So I want to read much more poetry than I read in 2021. For some reason I just wasn't gravitating towards it as much, mainly because I wasn't writing poetry. Like, when I'm writing poetry, I want to be reading it. When I'm reading it, it makes me want to write it. So I would like to do reading vlogs that focus on moving through a whole shelf of poetry, for instance, and then perhaps sharing some writing alongside. But that's definitely a goal of mine for this year. And then also, part of my reading is informed by the book reviews that I do elsewhere. So I'm the books editor over at Toast, which is a clothing company, but they have a magazine. So I review books there, and I pick books that I would like to review, but also that I think that particular audience would enjoy. So that's going to inform some of my reading this year as well. But essentially, I don't have any concrete plans or goals reading-wise this year. Last year, I didn't have any either. In the end, I think I read 150 books that were published, and then I worked on editorially about maybe 20 books that hadn't been published yet. So more of the same this year. I'd be very happy to read less than that as well. It's strange. I have spoken about this before, my relationship with reading. I find it all consuming sometimes because it is my job. I work in books, I work in publishing, so it's both what I do for pleasure, but also sometimes what I have to do for work, or it ties in with work in various different ways. I feel like it's a bookish maze I can never get out of, which is a pleasure and also sometimes a little bit overwhelming. But also, there are very loud parrots outside the window, again, parakeets. Also because of my health, because my eyesight is deteriorating, I get a panic because I want to read all the books, and I consume books obviously in audiobook form as well, and I will continue to read in whatever format, you know, going forward and forever. But I feel that extra sense of urgency, yet at the same time, as I get older, feel this sense of just release and letting go, and, you know, what will be, because you can't predict things, as we know, and have been reminded of. I've always felt that myself, because there has just always been things, especially with my body, that have crept up with over the years to remind me that you can't anticipate what is going to happen in your life. So I feel kind of at home in that uncertainty, and I've always felt at home in that uncertainty, but obviously in the past few years that has been heightened somewhat. And this year we will be moving house, as I mentioned before, also going through IVF. So there's just lots of stuff going on, which means that I don't know what this year is going to look like. I just do not know. But I know that books will be involved in a major way. And I have lots of plans and things that I'm excited about. But those also come with the caveat of just, you know, going with the flow as much as possible when books happen to also be your job. So I said that I needed some help from you. One of the videos that I would love to film is reading your favourite books of 2021. I've already asked for your suggestions, well, not suggestions, your answer over on Instagram, but in case you're not on Instagram, I would love to give you the opportunity here to leave a comment down below telling me what your favourite book of 2021 was, and then I'm going to make some kind of, is it going to be a spreadsheet? Probably not. I'm just going to go through everything and see the books that crop up the most and do a tally. And then I will read the books that are suggested the most, that also I am intrigued by. Because that's one of the things too. I'm going to be reading other booktubers' favourite books to make a video. But I'm not going to pick up books that, you know, if it's someone's favourite, but I think, well, I don't think I'd enjoy that, I'm not going to pick it up, because that's just a bit ridiculous. But I'm kind of trying to find the crossover in all of our tastes, because I think that that's probably the best thing content-wise, and also just for my enjoyment, and the fairest thing to do as well. So that is one of my plans for this year. So please do tell me in a comment down below what your favourite book of 2021 was. I would love to know that. I'm also going to be launching my first group writing workshops of 2022 very soon. So keep an eye on my website for those if you're interested in taking part, or you can leave a comment down below saying you'd like to be notified when those go up, and I'll just reply to your comment when they're available, and you can go over to my website and check it out. So those are all the things that I wanted to mention today. I would love to know how you are. I hope that you're having a good start to the week, and I will be back later this week with my favourite books of 2021 video. Sending lots of love.